Hey everyone, it's Zach Wright from IMEO Company, Improving Management, Employees, and Organizations. Today, I wanted to not talk about OKRs and dive in a little bit on 4 lessons that catapulted my career. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into it. The 4 lessons, or really tips, that I leveraged looking back on catapulting my career were the 4 that we see here. Develop a continuous learning mindset, manage up, ask your manager if they need help, work for a startup if you can, and then let people know the work you have completed. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, I started as an entry-level IT recruiter and made very little money. And then now I've catapulted to be part of the senior leadership team at a publicly traded company. I also have built out my company, the channel that you're watching, IMEO right now, into something that I'm very proud of, but I still feel like we're just beginning. So I wanted to go into each one of these 4 topics and just tell you what I actually mean by these. So first is develop a continuous learning mindset. What I mean by that is develop a sense of curiosity that drives you to learn what it is that you don't know. And that's a part of it, is understanding that you don't know certain things. Now, the ways that you can do this is by reading books. And if you're not into reading, you can listen to them on Audible, but actually listen and focus. What I do whenever I'm reading is I highlight the certain things that I consider takeaways that I want to remember. Then what I'll do is after each chapter or after the book, I'll go through and take notes on those things that I've learned and then store it in a place that I can look at or review it if I ever need to go back to it. And the reason that I do that is because it gives intentionality to an action. It's very easy to turn things that are habits into an autopilot response. But what we want to make sure that we're doing is being very intentional with the reason that we're learning. So in addition to reading, make sure that it's a book that is something, or that you're going to see valuable, and it's something that you're going to see that you can learn and then apply it to your certain situation, whether that's in life, business, or career. You want to make sure that what you're reading is applicable. That's how you're actually going to catapult your career, is you're learning things that you might have not experienced, but you're learning it from an experienced person. Now, some of the other things that you can do for continuous learning is podcasts. There are tons of business, leadership, probably specific industry and specific position related podcasts out there. Whenever I became the program management office lead for a startup company, I found out about the PMO podcast that I listened to, and I still listen to it today every once in a while. But at that time, that's what I needed to catapult myself into that specific position. So the reason that this is important is because once you develop that sense of curiosity, whenever you go into an organization, you're going to be more open-minded and ask more questions, and then you're going to get more answers from that, right? You ask more questions, you're going to get more answers. The other piece of the puzzle is whenever I go into an organization and I'm a new employee at an organization, I'm going through their intranet. I'm going through all the documents that most people haven't looked at for 5 or 10 years, and I'm learning about where the company was, where we are now. And then in some cases, I'm able to find certain documents that tells us where we want to go. And if I take that piece of the puzzle, or that little bit of information, or a lot of information, depending on the company, and then I apply it using what I've learned in podcasts, YouTube videos, books, then I'm able to exponentially decrease my gap on experience by leveraging what I've learned from other people. So that's why it's so important. And that's how it catapults you into your career. Now let's go to the second one. This is something in tandem. If you have a continuous learning mindset and then you add managing up to it, you're able to exceed the manager's expectations. Now, you might be asking, what do you mean by manage up? It's really asking your manager if they need help on anything that they're trying to execute. I did this in the first corporate position that I had, and she almost looked at me stunned. I could tell that nobody in that organization, or at least that team, has asked her for a long time if they could help her. She was carrying the weight on her shoulders the entire time. So I also knew that she was getting married at the time, and she probably had some other things going on, right? So read people, get to know their situation, and then also manage up. Simply asking them what you can do to take off their plate will give you an opportunity to take on a project that you might not have otherwise had the opportunity to do. And to make this even better, if you want to go in there with a suggestion. So there were two things that happened whenever I asked this manager if I could help. One was she gave me an idea of something that she was trying to implement and take care of. And then I also brought to the table an observation that I had, where it was, we had high turnover. We had a lot of new people. So we needed enablement. We needed training. We needed constant best practices by leveraging the more experienced people that we had on the team. She loved the idea. I was able to present myself as a leader, which ultimately moves me into the team lead role, where I beat out some people who were there 2, 3, 4 years above me. So that little bit of asking a question and then follow through, you have to follow through. It doesn't make sense. That little question with following through and seeing results as a result of that helped me get into the first management position that I ever had. So the next part is, if you can, and your mindset and everything is there, and you have resiliency, work for a startup company. That's why I put if you can, because you have to have the right mindset to work for a startup. You have to be scrappy. You have to be resilient. You have to think outside the box. You have to make things happen whenever you don't have as many resources. And that type of skill set will get you into a director level position, will get you into a VP position. Maybe not right away, but you're building for the future. And what I mean by that, whenever I was working for a startup company here in Charlotte, I started as the operations analyst person. And the scope of my position was so fluid, so unknown, that it allowed me to think strategically by leveraging the first two that I mentioned, being a continuous learner. So I went through every single thing that they had in the company, learned all of that, became somewhat of a go-to person at that company. Then I asked my manager, what can I do to help? And then in addition to that, I had to learn the skill of thinking ahead and being strategic on what it was that the company needed. So instead of a manager telling me what to do, I started thinking about what does the company need and implementing those things. And that ultimately got me promoted to program management office lead, as I mentioned before. And there I had to learn a whole new set of skills. And I did that through continuous learning. And then the biggest takeaway from the startup is that anything can happen at any moment. So 2 days before Christmas, I was laid off. And you might think that is a bad thing. And at the time, I most certainly did think that that was a terrible thing. But what happened was I was able to take that skill set, put it into my resume where it reflected all of the things that I of somebody with my experience or amount of experience would not normally have. Like somebody with my experience would not have PMO lead and building out a PMO from scratch. Those are the type of things, those are the benefits of working at a startup. You're most likely, if it's a very early startup, you're able to say that you built something from scratch, or you're able to say that you built something from scratch and then you built and hired a team underneath you. There's a lot of different things that can excel you by working in a startup, opposed to working in a large organization with bureaucracy that you have to jump through leaps and bounds and wait years and years before you get a promotion. But it is also a little bit risky. I mentioned getting laid off. It was a little bit risky. Fortunately, I was able to go into a much better position because of my resume at a much higher salary. And on top of that, now it's even more salary. Now, let's go to the last piece. This is probably the hardest one to do, because if you have humility and you don't have an ego, or you're an introvert, this is going to be hard for you to do. It was hard for me at first, but I slowly was able to do this, and I had to build that skill over time. But the fourth one is let people know the work you have completed. And what I really mean here is tell people what you have done, especially in today's environment. If you're working 100% remotely or you're hybrid, a lot of your work can be swept under the rug. If you're in a larger organization, a lot of your work can be taken from your manager. Your manager might ask you to do something, and if they're a bad manager, they might say that they did this, or they might take credit for directing you in that direction to execute that, which might be true, but you were the one that did the work. So my advice on this is to be careful on how you present this, because you don't want to make it seem like you're cocky or that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. How you want to do this is, if you're working on something and you're proud of it, say, hey, I want to show you something that I've been working on, and share your screen and walk people through it. And make sure that they know that you've done this, because once they start seeing all the things that you're doing, they're going to start looking at you as, oh, that's the person that can get a lot of things done. I did this in my current position, well, before I got into this position, but at this current company. Whenever I got into the organization, I was a continuous learner. So I learned everything that I could about the company. I'm still learning. It's a much bigger company in the sense of it's been around for 18, 20 years. So there's a lot to learn. But what I did learn, I was able to apply. And then I continued to ask my manager, what can I do to help you out? What can I do to extend my help? And since I had the startup mentality and what I learned in the startup, I was able to apply all of those three things and get to the point where the CEO actually wanted to start working with me more, and my manager wanted me to do more. And then eventually that turned into a promotion, and then a promotion, and then I got some direct reports underneath me. But the point is, if you take these four things and you build upon them, maybe you don't do the startup part because it's a little bit risky, you have a family to take care of, or something like that, but you do all the other things, you're going to see your career exponentially increase, or you're going to see it catapult in a way that you haven't seen it before. I hope that this video is helpful. I might turn it into a podcast. We'll see. But I hope that you found this beneficial, and I hope that the tips that I gave you here is something that you can apply right away and see how it works for you. If you have any questions on this, or if you want to know how to go about steps 1, 2, 3, or 4, or all of them together, drop something in the comment or reach out to me directly. But I want to say thank you so much for watching. And as always, you can reach out to me at info@imeoconsulting.com. I hope to hear from you and speak with you and possibly work with you in the future. But thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.